Earlier, I asked, Conan, what is best in DevOps? To crush your CVEs, to see threat models before you, and to hear the automation of their workflows. Which means, this week, we talk with Taylor McCaslin from GitLab about the coming season of analyst reports and how to read them with an eye towards what is best for your environment. In the news segment, clouds and APIs combine to confound CI/CD security. An image format and a regex flaw join forces against a Kindle. Seen through the invisibility of DNS over HTTP, contemplating a data security strategy, possibly under a tree of woe, and more. Come with me if you want to learn, and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Security teams need visibility into Linux systems to detect and investigate incidents and protect against unwanted activity. Operations teams are not down with downtime, and with revenue tied to uptime, ops priorities are enterprise priorities. Which is a higher priority? Why not both? Capsulate provides flexible, production-ready infrastructure protection for Linux systems, all without a kernel module. With ops-friendly production security, Capsulate delivers monitoring, detection, and response without adding operational risk or cost. Visit securityweekly.com/capsulate today to request a demo.
This is episode 137, recorded January 25th, 2021. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hello, John.
Good morning. I have to say it's a good thing I keep my mic on mute during your intros. Otherwise I'd probably be cackling over you.
Thank you. Well, if we hadn't Matt with us this week, I would have forced everyone to do a sea shanty. So I guess you would dodge that particular bullet. Woohoo! Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly, sea shanties or not? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list and join our Discord server. You could be chatting with us right now. Learn how to conquer cloud complexity in our first webcast of 2021, this Thursday, January 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Then next Thursday, in our first technical training of 2021, you'll learn how to manage insider risks in the work from anywhere world. Register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. And if you've missed any of our 2020 webcasts or technical trainings, they are available at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Taylor McCaslin is a multidisciplinary investor, product manager, and technologist living in Austin, Texas. Taylor works as a senior product manager at GitLab focused on security products. He is also the founder of Product Trust Investments, an angel fund focused on impact investing with companies that build ethical products that customers trust. Since 2012, he has worked at enterprise-scale, hyper-growth technology companies including New Knowledge, Duo Security, WP Engine, Indeed.com, and Bazaar Voice. Taylor can be found geeking out with the latest Apple gadgets, skiing, or enjoying the expansive Austin art scene. He also enjoys volunteering with local human rights and LGBTQ organizations around Central Texas, as well as mentoring young technologists looking to start careers in tech. Hello, Taylor, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, y'all. Thrilled to be back.
Absolutely, you're back. We last spoke with you in October 2020, and now we're speaking with you again at the beginning of 2021, which is riding the wave of a deluge of analyst reports that are coming out. And you gave us, I think, a great way to think about this, or a great metaphor to start with, is that, sure, there's tons of analyst reports coming out, but how do we actually read the tea leaves of them? And I'm really thinking about this from the consumer, the security team, a security strategist or director, maybe even a CISO at a company that says, sure, there's all these reports, but how, do they solve my problem? I think that's how that's sort of the perspective we're starting with. And my question then to you is, what are all the reports coming out and how should we read those tea leaves?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We are in analyst season. It seems like it never stops. You finish one and the rest of them come out as well. So in terms of what analyst reports are, there are a few major ones, but there is a wide variety of them. The ones that we'll talk about today, we'll look at the Forrester Wave, the Gartner Magic Quadrant, GigaOm's Radar. There's G2 peer reviews as well. Those are the top ones that we see a lot of activity with, specifically for application security testing. So yeah, that's kind of what we'll talk about today.
Now, one of the things that I'm going to guess is we're not going to talk about how to read through them with our own checklists, because in a way, a lot of these reports are perhaps going through checklists and positioning them into quadrants or areas on a wave or whatever the fancy, neat metaphor that they're using to frame the story. So I don't think it's so much as does this particular item hit this particular dimension on the x-axis, this other one on the z-axis, does it satisfy these couple of things? I think what you're kind of alluding to here is that there's maybe a bit more of a business reason to read these reports or something to tease out from them. So what should we actually be looking for in these reports?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, from my perspective of our conversation here today, it's not about what specific vendors are in what location on the chart at all, because I frankly think it's a bit irrelevant. I think it's, something that anytime you've got someone in the top right corner or in the best position on wherever the graphic ends up being the center, you always see those on social media. They are part of marketing campaigns. That to me is just sort of an outcome of what analyst reports are, that they are just point-in-time research reports that are focused on large vendors that end up part of marketing campaigns. From my perspective, really, the way to successfully use analyst reports is to cast a broad net against the industry and really look at what different analysts from different firms are responding to, where they think the market's going, and then throwing on sort of that lens of what do all of the vendors offer and those capabilities. I think at the end of the day, it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, I'll just buy the best one in the report. And in many cases, you've got to remember that analysts aren't actual companies. They don't have actual needs like the rest of us do. So these are all sort of through the lens of what an analyst perceives as the current needs are. So you always do want to take whatever you read in the analyst reports and put it through the lens of what are my challenges in my organization? Where are we struggling? Where are our gaps? So that's kind of how I would think about analyst reports.
Yeah, so it sounds more like the analysts are giving you perhaps the trend or where the industry is going to, and for that matter, it might be in some cases where what the industry is leaving behind. So I can imagine from that perspective, you don't necessarily want to bet on the wrong horse, but kind of what you said, you don't just want to bet on a horse at a particular point just because it's leading the pack. And I think what you're getting at really is it might be a great vendor, but are they addressing the problem that you have before you right now? So I think maybe, so my question there is then, what if I am the business, the organization? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this properly. What does the business report for myself? How does my own analyst report might that look when I adopt a solution? How, what are the ways that, that I should be evaluating that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really successful way to use these analyst reports is most of them have what Gartner calls key capabilities. Forrester has a name for it as well. They're exclusion and inclusion criteria. Take a look at those criteria. The reports generally explain what it means and why they've chosen it. So you can kind of take those areas of focus and ask yourself, is this a problem I have in my organization? And then rank those problems for yourself. I think it's something we see customers do here at GitLab. We're, of course, like a giant platform that spans many different analyst reports. So we always have to help our customers interpret that we're not any one particular report. We're a consolidation of a lot of things because we're a platform. So we help customers really go through and say, what are those key problems we have? And then rank them with how important of a problem that is to solve. How big of a pain point is it for an organization? How critical is it to your success? And you can kind of create a little matrix for yourself where you've got your specific key capabilities and then your weighting factor for how important those are. And then you can pick and choose vendors that seem to rank well in various reports and evaluate them for yourself. I think that's a really strong way to use analyst reports to kind of read what's happening in the market and to really put that lens on what's happening with us, with our organization, with our problems right now. And you've got to remember too that these analyst reports, they're just point in time. Many of our software today is SAST solutions. They get better every single release continuously. Something we like to tell people when they ask us about our analyst ranking is many times the analyst report that someone's looking at is from 2020. And we actually filled out that analyst survey briefing in December of 2019. We're now, a year later with a ton of different features and functionality that report is already out of date. And in fact, it's generally out of date the day it's published because it's got a 3 or 4 month lead time on it. So you always want to be taking a look at what do vendors offer today and what are my problems in my organization today? And do those two things line up?
Yeah, one of the things I was mentioning quite a bit is saying from the business perspective and looking at it from that angle, but we are talking generally about the application security testing space, so the AST, and I think we smartly kind of avoided that first letter. Is it D, S, I, what type of testing? So my question here is I'm kind of curious too, what about, setting aside the business idea who may be interested in where is the industry going? What are the tools that are favored right now, maybe disfavored? What if I'm the DevOps side of things? If I'm on the DevOps side, what's useful in these reports, or perhaps what's useful the way to say use that report to have a better conversation with a vendor that I might be interested in?
Yeah, so I think that's a really strong way to use multiple reports, because the whole thing is each analyst firm has its own opinion on how the market's sliced, what the market looks like. For example, Forrester does their wave on a particular technology. So we just completed the SAST 2021 analyst briefing. Gartner Magic Quadrants focused on the larger AST market. GigaOM does a DevSecOps radar report. So they all slice the market slightly differently. So you can use these different analyst reports to get different perspectives of the market. And then, not all of them cover the same vendors either. So if you're in particularly looking at, let's say, a small startup that may not register on something like a Gartner Magic Quadrant, they very well might show up in a GigaOM report or G2 peer review. So that's a way that you can sort of blend together those different analyst reports to really get a perspective of what you're looking for. And I think when you're comparing vendors and analyst reports, it really is key for you to focus on what are those problems. I know I keep saying that, but it's so important because it's easy to get caught up in however an analyst looks at something. But your core problems in your organization, that's what you're responding to and dealing with. And when you put the analyst reports being potentially months out of date or quarters out of date, plus the time it takes you to evaluate solutions, to purchase a solution, to roll out a solution, to train your users on whatever solution it is, that's a lot of time we're talking about. And you want to make sure that you're making the right bets.
So one of those things there too. Oh, go ahead, John.
Okay. Squeeze in. Sorry. So I can't remember if we talked about this before the last time you were on. I don't think we did. We got speaking of, it's not a report, but a survey in our news section after this. And so I want to talk about a little bit here. One thing that's interesting about particularly GitLab, and I think this question will get interesting, but I'm going to talk about GitLab for a second. You guys cover, everything obviously from just, the Git type stuff. Then we're talking about static analysis and all these sort of tools you guys have added over the years. Where that becomes interesting here to me from the tea leaf reading point of view is you suddenly, if you want to make, whoever wants to make that choice or that decision about a purchase, there's a pretty good chance there's a lot of folks in that room with different hats on trying to read the tea leaves. And I'm just sort of curious, the report I'm thinking about from Radware, we'll go cover in the news. One thing they mentioned in there, I'm quoting a number off the top of my head, but I think it's The security folks are, I think they have about a 22% of the time they have a chance of actually influencing the purchase of a DevSecOps product. The developers are usually the guys who have a little more pull on it. So, just how do people read these tea leaves when it's, you have to read them not just by yourself, but in a group of 10 or 20 of y'all?
Yeah, this is a fun challenge for us at GitLab because we span so much. We always have to ask, who is it we're talking to? Are we talking to a traditional security team? Are we talking to a developer team? Are we talking to a hybrid of the two or a CISO? Because you always have to change the way you talk to those folks to really speak to what their pain points and struggles are. And that's something that I think analyst reports have a really hard time dealing with, because at the end of the day, you've got to remember that analyst reports are really kind of pay to play. They're published because people make money off them. They're part of marketing campaigns to drive people to choose technology systems. And at the end of the day, it's trying to be everything for everyone. And that's not how we solve problems. And this is why I'm so focused on what are your problems? What teams are going to use these technologies, because that dramatically changes maybe what technology you end up going with. At GitLab, we are definitely focused on the platform play, that we're bringing security to developers, integrating it into that experience holistically with the source code management platform, CI/CD, and security tools. We're seeing that, being recognized in the community. Those are the types of deals that GitLab tends to win, when it's not just a security team buying a solution, but also partnering with a DevOps or a development org to even in many cases split that cost, which is an interesting sort of position to be in as a vendor. And it's something that you don't really see captured in a lot of the analyst reports. Even just the difference between what an SMB needs and an enterprise needs is night and day. And you see each kind of report try to tease that out in different ways. They'll rank them, they'll score them in different manners, but it's a really difficult challenge.
Yeah, I think for me too, we've talked about this quite a bit in the past. I know we've talked with you about it too, is that one of the things that perhaps either is missing or maybe isn't really a major focus of these types of reports is even just the developer experience, meaning there's a difference between who's making the purchase decision, who's influencing the purchase decision, and who's actually stuck with the purchase decision, to put it in a bit more stark terms. So, Taylor, I'm kind of curious, when we talk about the conversation in these reports or around these reports, is there something in particular you wish they would focus on more?
Yeah, I mean, you've also got to remember, too, that these reports are targeted more at business decision makers. They're not targeted at end users. And so you've always got this sort of disconnect between the people who are actually going to use the technology every single day and the people who make the decisions to buy and roll out a technology. So that kind of gets back to you got to get everyone internally on the same page about what are our problems and what needs to be solved. And this is why we really like walking our customers through sort of an evaluation internally for themselves of what are those problems? How would you rank them? Go share that with your security team, with your developers, with your C-suite, and make sure everyone agrees on those. And what we find is that almost never does everyone agree of what the problems are. And so they have a very good conversation internally about what's important. And they learn a little bit more about their organization, and then they can make a more informed decision. I think, for us at GitLab, because we span so many solutions, if we're not your security team's favorite solution, we might be your developer's preferred solution. So we can hit this from a lot of different perspectives. And I think that's one too, where, when you're reading an analyst report, you're defaulting to that analyst's view and perception of a technology suite. Again, it comes baked with a lot of assumptions about the market, the vendor itself, how they play in the analyst space, how they play in the marketing space. So there's lots of factors that you don't get to control and that are not explicitly stated in these reports. So that's why I just say, you got to keep taking it back to your team. And this just goes back to, if you can get your departments who are going to use the technology to agree and to understand what your problems are internally, I think you'll end up choosing a vendor that successfully meets those criteria.
But so let's take it into that a tiny bit further. And this comes back to we're slowly circling around. We're going to get something here. And I think this is what's I don't mean that in a bad way. This is a great conversation. But down to that point where I'm thinking around is you've got that security guy at the desk, you've got the operations and the DevOps person at the desk, and maybe the GitLab maintainer or the repo maintainer. How do you, when I'm thinking about reading tea leaves, each of those folks is really coming at it from their own point of view.
Right.
How is there a way that, and because I'm in this boat a little bit too at my place now, how do we sort of get those guys to empathize with their coworkers and think about what, I mean, this isn't even specific to the repo products, right? Just pretty much any of us in DevSecOps, there's multiple folks wearing different hats on this table. Is there a way to, is there a value or is there a way to get the security guy to think about what does a day in the life of a developer look like? Or vice versa. And for them to understand, okay, while the Forrester report might have, X in that top corner, that might be really great for me, but how does that affect the security guy? Is there any value in trying to get folks to think about that?
No, I absolutely think so. And this is one where you've got to have those frank conversations about what is important internally, because, when you look at the security industry, it's a hard space. We've got vulnerabilities flying at us every single day. We've got 0 days dropping. You've got your organization with its own problems, just trying to ship software. As we all know, deploying software now has never been more complicated. I think of that shipping containers image, that it's just really difficult to deploy software now, much less secure it in a dynamic environment where compute costs are as low as they've ever been. So it just lowers the bar for attack. Like, there's so much going on for so many people. The developers are focused on just trying to write software. You've got the DevOps people trying to just keep up deploying the software that the developers are writing, but also keeping everything up and on. You've got the security people who are panicked about deploying every single day all of that software that's getting written and deployed, and keeping all of that functioning in a secure manner, responding to the changing ecosystem. So everyone's got their own problems to deal with, much less than, on top of all of that, are businesses trying to make money in a marketplace, selling to customers. It's a lot of different challenges that I think it's easy to get stuck in your own perspective, your own little area. But when you start really understanding what is it that, security people do all day, what is it the developers struggle with, you start understanding why security people are in a very right now, we've got to respond to this, where developers are like, I just don't want to change my workflow because it's already complicated enough to write software. You've got the DevOps people who are sitting trying to balance both of those people. So it's just a lot of challenges that I think if you can have those conversations and maybe even use these reports or a particular vendor to better understand why a solution is or isn't good for a particular team, that kind of helps people frame that conversation.
How was that circle for you, John? Have we illuminated how all these different teams work together?
It's funny. Sorry, I was muted because I was actually typing something in Discord, and that's the question of we talk about full stack developers. Why don't we just talk about full stack operators, right? And I think that's sort of another way of looking at this. Like the developer who's used to working on back end, if they have an understanding what's going to go on in the front end code, the tailors comes back to your comment about everyone's busy in their own space. But and specifically, you mentioned the DevOps guys are busy just trying to deploy the code that the developer is writing. I'd add one more on there. Frequently, they're not even sure what the latest features are, right? So if they don't know what it is they're deploying, how do they know if it's actually deployed right, or how can they test it, work with QA, all these different things? And this then comes back to the product and reading again the tea leaves. How do we get them to? Your answer is right. Checkbox, Mike. He gets a checkbox. But what does it's something I spend a decent amount of time thinking about is how do we make this better? And I think we'll probably have to. We have a few more episodes we can cover that on nothing but that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing, kind of to riff off what you were also saying, is that we also talk about, how much effort should we put into training and teaching developers to be pen testers or developers to understand security testing. How often have we had that conversation about how much do we train security folks to be developers? And, looking at especially something like GitLab, I think helps put that very directly in view, since it's quite a bit a combination of very developer-centric experience, developer-centric tools, as well as a lot of security tools on top of them. So Taylor, one of the things we are also talking about that we can do with tea leaves, of course, are to read the future, look towards the future. Now, I'll take an easy one here and say that SolarWinds, of course, is quite topical, and that's probably not going to show up in many of the analyst reports this year, unless they made some last-minute changes. But at the end, looking at next year 2022 reports, it's going to be all SolarWinds. But my question for you then is, what's the future look like for you, both either as GitLab or just where you would like to see the direction of these kind of reports going for better consumption for the security teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned SolarWinds. Certainly, we've seen a lot of inquiries from customers struggling with how to even think about that with their software, how they build and how they deploy it. We've seen a lot of interest in composition analysis tooling. So this is kind of like that fun challenge where with security, we're just always on. There's always new things happening, and you've got to be able to leverage all of the newest and latest functionality. And, at GitLab, that is why we have more of a platform play where we don't do any one particular kind of security testing. We like to do a little bit of everything because SAST is good for some things. Composition analysis is good for others. Fuzz testing is great for APIs. When you can take all of those types of security tools, leverage them within something like a source code management platform and a CI/CD. What I like to tell customers is it's not just us evaluating your software with our security tools. We have your source code. We know how it changes. We know how you deploy that. We know how you build it. We know where you deploy it to. All of those are critical inputs to the security of your software that allow us to make our scanners a little bit smarter, to where SAST can know the history of your code and what has changed. We can say, hey, SAST found this vulnerability. Let's go exercise that with DAST. Or, hey, you've got this new API endpoint. Let's go exercise that with fuzz testing. All of that allows us to really start tying together and integrating these security tools to where the tools themselves are not operating blindly. They have the context of the code, the way it's deployed, the way it's built. And I think that's really fundamental to the way that we build and ship software today. And, when you think about where analysts are at now, we hear the shift left. At GitLab, we like to say shift left, but not too far left, because if you go too far to a developer's individual machine, you can't fully control what a developer's IDE is or how they've got it configured or how they write software. Instead, we have that source code management layer where we can control the way or the security profile of code that's coming in at the time of commit and merge. So it's just kind of slightly different ways of thinking. And we talked about the time problem as well. And this is one where GitLab is a SAST product. We ship every single month on the 22nd. We're able to very quickly respond to various changes in the ecosystem. And in fact, between all of our security scanners, we're updating those signatures and the underlying tools multiple times a week and shipping that outside of GitLab's normal update capabilities. So there's just a lot to manage here, particularly in the security space. So I would love to see, analysts think more about what it means to do continuous security, what it means to have a SAST security offering. We're not, buying a hardware solution, plugging it into a server rack and leaving it turned on and updating it every year. That's just not how security software works today. That's not the environment that we're working in. As we shift to cloud native with multiple clouds, hybrid clouds, all of the software just changing every single day, it's just a different kind of beast to really manage and to keep a sense of what's changing and what's new, what's hot, what doesn't work, what's a problem today.
No, I think that's great. And I think you've given us a great idea about we could have a continuous conversation about all of these aspects about security testing, analyst reports, and just getting stuff done. And I think the one thing that I missed hearing from your pitch was how that GitLab is putting all this engineering together, bringing feedback from different tools. The only thing it was missing, I say this with a smile, was some reference to AI. So I'm sure that's one of the barriers to entry to get onto some of the reports.
Yeah, it's a key capability. It's one that I always laugh at because I think we all know like AI and ML is not a trivial technology. And in many cases, when you look at just the ecosystem we're in, you don't need a lot of intelligence to make tools smarter. So in many cases, I think, if only a security scanner had a little bit more knowledge about how it was deployed or what kind of code it was tested on, that would make a more material impact than us putting some AI engine on top of it, trying to interpret and coming up with whatever, black box answers that none of us are going to agree on anyway, because all of our organizations can't agree on the severity of a vulnerability.
Yes, well, I'll let you in on a secret that you don't need a lot of intelligence to host a podcast either. But we do appreciate you coming, Taylor. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, always happy to be here. Y'all are great.
And we'll have to have you back for a third time at least. This was fun. And I will give a shout out to my more intelligent co-host, John. Thank him for joining us. Thank all of you for joining us as well. If you'd like to learn more about GitLab, visit securityweekly.com/GitLab. And with that, we're going to take a quick break and return with news of the week.